Hi. In 1969, a young woman gave an electrifying valedictorian speech. It received a 7-minute-long standing ovation, and it landed her in Life magazine and established her as a force to be reckoned with. From there, she went on to Yale Law, where she was one of only 27 women in her program. After this prodigious education, this young woman plunged headlong into politics, working on George McGovern's ill-fated 1972 presidential campaign, and even ending up on the Watergate Committee. Later, she'd become a law professor, and she'd helped found an advocacy center for children and families, which, among other things, provided legal aid, often to single mothers. No longer a young woman, but a mother herself, this successful, outspoken, and determined woman would become First Lady of Arkansas and then the United States. This woman was Hillary Clinton. Perhaps you already knew a lot of her story, or perhaps you didn't. Perhaps the myth of Hillary Clinton has become so pervasive that it now seems more like the truth than the truth. If I may, I'd like to take a little time to talk about the real Hillary Clinton, to look at the woman, not the caricature, the advocate, not the eternal politician. And in doing so, I'd like to illuminate not just the woman, but the unique challenges that have shaped all women in power, but perhaps Hillary more than any other. I think if we can look beyond the virulent partisanship and the vicious politics, we can see the value in Hillary's past, present, and future, no matter what side of the political aisle we fall on. I said I wanted to look at the woman behind the myth, but that's admittedly a little hard, because Hillary is, in many ways, closed off. She's also ambitious, calculating, and by some estimations, hawkish. But what about those traits is inherently bad? And perhaps the more salient question, what politician doesn't possess those traits? Every president, especially the great ones, are ambitious. If they weren't ambitious, they would never have made it through the arduous process of presidential campaigning. And calculating, FDR reshaped the country and the United States government, and he did so by making calculated decisions, like compromising with Southern Democrats on issues of race, in order to get his landmark programs passed through Congress. JFK, like many presidents before and after him, made calculated decisions, prioritizing stability over civil rights in numerous South American countries. When you reach a certain level of power, it seems inevitable that you make calculated decisions. And it was Hillary's calculating personality that helped her push through landmark legislation in a complex and fractious political landscape. For evidence of this, you just have to look at the Iranian nuclear deal. But, to quote Hillary herself, sometimes you are only left with the least bad choice. So why deride this woman when we so often applaud her male counterparts? Why is she routinely held up by her detractors as a uniquely terrible figure, when it's clear that her vices are anything but unique in American politics, and arguably politics in general? One answer to this lies in the double bind that all women in power, not just politicians face. Double binds, to put it very succinctly, boil down to working twice as hard for half as much. That's why Hillary Clinton is seen as calculating. She has to closely consider every action and speech she does or gives in order to appear strong but not too strong, passionate but not emotional, caring but not sentimental. And she must do all that while bumping up against the traditional ideal of the woman, which is the nurturer. You can see this double bind at work in the Doge media coverage this summer. Much was written about Hillary's authenticity, or lack thereof. But Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump were all declared authentic by the press. According to the press, they said what they meant, and they said it in whatever volume they chose to. But does anyone think for one moment that Hillary would have been called authentic if she started giving angry, Trumpian, or Sanders-esque speeches? The adjectives would have been shrill and scolding, not authentic. These constant double standards present themselves in other ways too, like coverage of Hillary's hair and fashion. Her male counterparts rarely, if ever, get any attention paid to either one. But for Hillary, an entire news cycle was recently dominated by the question of whether or not she now wears a wig. And that kind of coverage isn't new or unusual. When Bill Clinton was running for president in 1992, thousands of words were spent on Hillary's choice to wear a headband and how that small, insignificant choice, really, somehow signaled a lack of commitment to hair care and therefore traditional feminine values. Then, of course, there's comments about her age. Despite the fact that she's not the oldest candidate running for president in either party, and that if she was elected, she wouldn't be the oldest president. And her age itself illustrates another double bind, where female politicians are routinely older and more experienced than their male counterparts. First-time politicians, that is. This phenomenon comes down to the fact that women have to overcome a built-in experience gap, where men are immediately and unconsciously determined to have a certain base level of qualification. So perhaps decades of this balancing act and the accompanying scrutiny explains why Hillary is closed off. She does it to protect herself. That's an incredibly human impulse. Just as her reaction to her husband's well-publicized affair was incredibly human. And the affair itself is likely another reason that she's closed off. After the affair went public, Hillary, understandably hurt and upset, threw a book at her husband's head. This would have been a rather pedestrian situation if it weren't for the fact that her husband was president and the Secret Service had to intervene. Ultimately, though, Hillary forgave her husband, just as she forgave President Obama after a vicious primary and went to work in his cabinet. That primary was filled with accusations of racism, sexism, and personal attacks. But she gave a gracious concession speech and moved forward. Hillary might be ambitious and calculating, but she's also forgiving. And she's tough. And she's tenacious. And she's pragmatic. And she's intelligent. You can see that in her biography at the top of the speech. But you can also see it in the testimonials of her supporters, who report meeting her and having her remember months-old conversations about their sick children. You can also see it in the necessarily quiet release of a jailed Uzbek poet whose life she prioritized over the political points she would have scored had it been widely publicized. Of course, none of this is to say that Hillary is perfect. She isn't. But neither is she the caricature her detractors on either side make her out to be. She is, as writer Rebecca Traister said best, the first, who are often the onlys for too long. Like President Obama, the first African American president, Hillary, no matter the outcome of this election, will serve as the reflection of her gender. It will be distorted, incomplete, always dissatisfying reflection, but a reflection nonetheless. It's an impossible task because no one person can represent an entire group. Certainly not one made up of millions and millions of people. But we will still live through a referendum on our status, our abilities, our deficiencies. But maybe we can do something else too. In 1995, when Hillary Clinton went to Beijing and declared women's rights are human rights, Rebecca Traister was inspired. When I cast my first ever vote in the North Carolina 2008 Democratic primary for Hillary Clinton, I was inspired. Today, she's inspiring 12-year-old Olivia, who wants to be Hillary's youngest campaign volunteer. And she's inspiring 4-year-old Sullivan, who loves Hillary so much that she dressed up as her for Halloween. Hillary has fought for women her entire career. And whether or not she gets elected, and whether or not you agree with her politics, she will help change the way little girls see politics and see themselves in politics. And there is value in that. Just as there's value in looking beyond the myth of Hillary Clinton to the woman underneath, an imperfect but still remarkable person. Thank you.